go, Jim. He's dead.
Hello and welcome to Improv Autopsy. I'm your host, Stephen Cadwell. This episode is the first part of my interview with Crystal Haralambou. Crystal is founder of Improv Exchange, which books improv training workshops for businesses and other corporate training opportunities. I'll leave a link in the show notes for you to check out. Crystal is also one of those people who has done and continues to do things other people only talk about. She's a professionally trained improviser who started a team which grew into a theater with its own space in Tampa, Florida. She was artistic and producing director of her theater until the pandemic shuttered it for good in 2020. Crystal continues to forge a path teaching students and business leaders. She is a great leader and a great improviser herself, and I hope you enjoy part one of Crystal Haralambou's Improv Autopsy. Thank you so much for joining me on my podcast, Improv Autopsy. You are still in Florida, right?
Yes, I'm in Tampa, Florida. Mm-hmm.
This will all be explained later, but you're someone I have a great deal of respect for a variety of reasons. But before we get to later in the story, what was your first encounter with improv that got you connected to this giant crazy family?
Well, I actually went to an arts magnet school, and so my first encounter with improv was there. There was no formal class in improv. It was just part of the process. We used it as a tool to get to the play, scenes in the play. But then I sort of just avoided it as, I don't know why. Didn't avoid it on purpose. It just wasn't part of my training. And I went to college for theater, and there was only one class that was offered. And sadly, because when I look at the program, I think, gosh, you're missing this huge part. Improv has such an influence in today's culture. And it's just like, sad to me that that's not a key component to the training. And maybe it's changed since then. I actually probably need to do some research, but I did take a class there, and it was just more exploratory, a lot of observation of the world, and just like a little bit of the spontaneity of improv. So my real first class in improvisation was at SAC Comedy Lab, and it was back in 95. There I was sort of introduced to the bones of improvisation, and I think that's where I was on fire. I first of all, when I went, I was so nervous. I was like, this is terrifying to me, but also because I've only studied traditional theater. So this was like uncharted territory for me. But I had seen SAC perform, and I was like, they are amazing. It looks like so much fun, and they're having such a good time that was the huge attraction for me. And I was like, I need to at least try this. And so I would commute every week all the way to Orlando, and I would take the class, and I couldn't wait to get to the next class. Like, I got the bug right away, and I was like, this is invigorating. It's exciting. I'm meeting amazing people. I'm having a blast doing it. Like, all the things that happen in an Improv 1 class were happening to me at that time. And it was with SAC, who I got to see too. Like, they were like, come see shows so that you can learn more. And I was like, yes, I will. So that was like my first encounter with improv.
And that would have been when they were still on Church Street then, right? The first theater they had?
Yes, that's back in the day. But now they're back, right? Are they back there?
They're back on Church Street, yes. I mean,
okay.
that building, I think, was demolished before I even moved to Florida, but the original building. But yeah, they're back on Church Street, 55 West.
Okay.
Do you remember who your first teacher was?
Oh my gosh.
Or any of your instructors?
Yes, I do. I remember Megan Soul.
Okay.
Was one of my teachers. I don't know if she was my first teacher. Ryan, I still keep in touch with him, and he performs with Impro Theater. Last I checked, he did in LA, and he was great too. Lyle Moon, I had a lot of good instructors there actually. Yeah. So yeah, I will say they all impacted me greatly. Just like you remember who your second grade teacher was in school. Like, I really do feel like they were feeding into my soul, my growth as a creative. And I felt that. I mean, I know sometimes it can feel like the world of improv is so obscure, but I felt that. And I think that when I became a teacher of improvisation, I was like, I want to be that for other people. I want them to, like, even if they don't remember who I am, I want them to remember this feeling. Yeah. So that was important.
Was your first improv show then part of the grad class or graduation from the SAC program, or did it come later?
It was before that. I actually ended up joining a local team, or I auditioned for a local team, probably when I hit level 2.
Okay.
So level 2, I had met some other people from Tampa, and they were already on some team here. But then there was like a new team starting, and somebody encouraged me to go audition. So I was like, okay. And I went, and I was like, this is so cool. It's just great to be at the audition. I was like very low standards at that point. I was just like, I'm having a great Saturday. So yeah, I was just like, but it was funny because I actually felt, there's a few times in my life where I felt this, where I felt like I'm in transition and something in my life is changing here. And it's exciting. I didn't know exactly fully what that would mean for me, but I could feel that impetus for something new that was like, this is important. I need to pay attention to it. And I remember that day at the audition, I was like, something is changing in my life. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, I ended up getting on that team. They were gradually integrating the newbies. And so I think I did have one show or two shows with them before I got to the next level, level 3. And then I felt like the graduation show with SAC would have been a significant moment for me too, though. Actually, Stephen, I'm not even sure. The first show may have been like I don't know if I was, you know how your first show is? Like your head is in the clouds, but like maybe you weren't that great. I don't know. I feel like that probably happened on my first show there. Even if there was a second show, I don't know. I remember there was a moment where I went into the lobby and some of the guys that were like, they were just like the icons of SAC Comedy Lab. They like came over and were like, that was great. And I was like, no way. That's so cool. I was so starstruck and like fangirling because I just was like, they're so good. So for them to say to me like, that was good, like it just really was so honoring. And the fact that they even took time to come talk to me, I was struck by that, you know, and I know some of them are still doing improv like in Chicago and LA and stuff. So it's kind of cool to keep up with them and seeing that they're still doing it as a lifelong journey. But yeah, so that was the second show, I think, was more significant for me. I think the first one I was like, I need to get better at this. So anyway.
Well, it's also, I mean, when your emotions are running so high, it's hard to pinpoint or remember a lot of what goes on the first time around as well.
Yeah, that's true.
I love that you jumped into an audition and got onto a team before, you know, just at level 2. And that's something that, I mean, Offsides formed because we didn't get promoted into lab rats, I think. So we're like, hey, we like to do this. We still want to do this. And I think those reps, regardless of kind of where you are in the education journey, but those reps are really invaluable.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I feel like, I mean, gosh, you know, you just learn so much by just showing up.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's like a huge thing. It's like we're in such a creative culture right now that if the path you thought you had to take doesn't work for you, like make a path. And I mean, I'm sure people know that, but it is like your path is just as valuable as the next person's, and you make it what it is. And I love that you formed that. Even when we had auditions at the theater years later, I would say that to people. And I think they were kind of like, yeah, if I didn't make a team, I'm not good at this. But I was kind of like, don't worry. If you didn't make a team, like form a team, like absolutely do that. And I think they just didn't trust me when I would say that. So...
Do you remember the name of that team that you auditioned for and got on?
Yes, it was called BAIT, BAIT, and it stood for Bay Area Improv Theater.
Yes, and they were around for a while. I remember connecting with some of them at a festival or somewhere in Orlando, maybe.
Yeah, we did some of those things, and we took the theme of, I remember having like an actual bait box. It had like, ask fors inside of it that were just like on little cards or whatever. So I think we leaned into that theme a little bit, but we were a short form team mostly. I think we were trying to venture into long form. And at that point, I was so resistant to it because I had only learned at SAC and hadn't had any long form classes. Yeah. So I was like, I just want to do the fun stuff. Stop making me do all this heavy thinking, you know? But it was good. It was just like you said, like coming every week, having that time that was just carved out for creativity with a whole group of people and collaboration. I mean, that is something that I just didn't see at the moment, the value of that. Sometimes I would wake up and be like, oh, I have to go to rehearsal. But it really was that showing up consistently, working with those people collaboratively and feeling like they were committed to me as much as I was to them. And I think that was such a huge part of the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Larry was part of that group, right?
Yes. Larry was part of that group.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm just making sure I'm remembering correctly. So you were in BAIT, and that was when you were still doing classes at SAC.
Yes.
And then after you graduated from SAC, Did something keep you in Tampa? It's a long drive, so it's a bit of a commitment if you're going to
Yeah.
try to drive up there to do much else. But what was the next step for you?
After that great show at SAC, I was like, oh man, this is awesome. Are we going to find out about like the next step and everything? And SAC was going through a major transition. I don't know if it was a staffing transition or what, but like, I think they just sort of like dropped the ball. No offense, SAC, if you're listening, because I totally love you and I'm devoted to you no matter what. But they just sort of dropped the ball. And I think nobody got contact after that. Eventually, a whole new group of people leading and a whole new set of classes, and I was like, what do we do? So I think like at that moment, unfortunately, that wasn't the next step. There wasn't included. I did volunteer. I would drive up there and just like volunteer to be an usher or something so I could continue to see really good work. And I think if I can remember the timeline correctly, I was with BAIT for a long time. We did a bunch of festivals and things like that. And then in 2006, I actually was a part of like an intentional community here in Tampa, and we all decided to go move overseas together. So we were doing that as just something, another piece of my life. And we went and lived in the Philippines for a year. So I was sort of like, I'm out, love you guys, I have to go do this thing. And so we did like volunteer work and stuff in the Philippines. But it's funny enough, one day we were in the park and I saw this group of people in Southeast Asia, and they were just like jumping around and doing some weird stuff. And I was like, oh, those are my people. Those are improvisers. I know they're improvising. Like, I just knew it. And sure enough, I was right. And that was just really cool. But while I was in the Philippines, I got to teach. There was a school that I worked in one of the slum communities. And I mean, it was like dirt floors, no roof, all bare bones. And I got to work with some teachers there. But one of the pieces at the end of the trip was that we invited all the teachers from all the different communities together. And even with a language barrier, we had translators, but I got to do some improv training with them to show them like, how can you use this in the classroom? And that was really special. But then when I got back to the US, which was just a year later, I did reconnect with BAIT, and I sort of tried to jump back in, and it was a little different. It was a little jolting, probably for me and them. And I think probably within, I want to say a year or two, the team sort of started to fall apart a little bit. And that, I don't know what the catalyst was. You know, I think, and this might be a little bit presumptuous on my part, so forgive me, but I would say like there is something about if you're with a team of people for a long time, maybe this happens in every kind of team. It doesn't have to just be an improv team, but they start to look inward a little bit and be more critical of each other inwardly. And I do think there is a place for creative criticism overall, but like, I do think that's probably the start of a slow death when it comes to a team. So it's like really need somebody in the team that can be a visionary and call people sort of out of that and say like, let's remember the mission here, which is that we're going to create art together and that we don't have to keep looking at all of our flaws. And so I think there's something about that. And it felt like that got echoed through future teams, or like the way that I approached leading teams in the future was with that mindset of let's just be careful and cautious of this because it is something special that will not last forever, but also it has this really significant impact in our life for this season of our life. And so I think that that was a big thing that started to happen with that team. Was it just started, we were looking inward, and some people were like, I'm out. And so we were like, oh no, we're losing people here. And I think that affected the change and the shape of the team. And eventually it just sort of dwindled down to, I don't know, maybe it still exists. No, it doesn't exist anymore. But no, I think there's still remnants of that. And those people, I mean, the improv community is so small. Those people are still here.
Yeah.
A lot of them. And we still know each other and see each other, you know, online and whatnot. And sometimes at auditions and things, but there's still love and compassion for each other, I think. I think we remember that season in our life. It was special. So we remember that when we see each other.
What I'm hearing, I think, is that the disillusion of BAIT is definitely not your fault for leaving.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just teasing.
Actually, everyone contributes. Everyone contributes. Whether for good or bad, everybody contributes.
No, but seriously, I feel like there's a lot of wisdom in what you're saying, and it's interesting the ebb and flow of some of those things and why some teams really just have a synergy that lasts and others may have it for a period and then for whatever reason I think seasons of life is also a good idea, good point that you brought up, because it may be, maybe people have kids, maybe other things happen, maybe work changes and life changes and you can't commit as much time as you once did and things change.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Like we're always evolving. So it might feel like, oh, this is like a family will be together forever, but it's actually, I don't think that's really, I wonder if someone's ever done a study on like what the longevity of teams are, but I don't think that's probably realistic and sustainable. It is good though. I remember when I was leading at the theater, we would call people to a commitment of a year and say like, please just commit for the next year. And then at that point, we can reevaluate the commitment. And some people found that really hard. And some people found it, okay, good. Yeah, I can do that. I can commit for the year because then it's not forever and
Yeah.
I can see where I'm at. So, yeah.
So Bait then dissolves.
Yes.
And then you don't have anything, or did you already have something else? What was the next step?
Great question. So I was I was still friends with the people that I had gone to the Philippines with, and we were back and we were trying to implement some of the values that we had experienced there from the people there. And I know that's weird, but it was just like more of like a translation. We wanted to like do some of the things that people were doing. And so it seemed like all my friends were sort of committed to like, I feel really called to do this thing and I really want to do this. So they were kind of they were just sort of defining their paths. And I just felt like, I meet artists all day. I was working at the Straz here in Tampa, which is one of the larger performing arts centers. And I just felt like I meet all these artists and the thing they don't have is space. And they really can't afford this space because
Right.
It was just so expensive. No offense to the Straz either. But yeah, it was just like, we have artists in our city, but like space is not accessible to them. And really that's what they want. And that's what they need in order to just go the next step and to continue on their, success. And so I remember sharing that with a friend and they were like, I'll give you space. And I was like, what? And so they did. They gave us a free space at the time. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to make this accessible to artists. And I want to build something, I want to start something. And so I started with gathering people I knew that liked improvisation. I was like, come improvise with me. I don't know what this looks like, but like, let's do it. And then when we met, it was a little bit flexible at first. And then people were like, no, we need to pick a time and a date. Let's do this every week. And so I was like, okay. And so we started to do that and, gradually started some classes and met other people and it started to really take off. And I was surprised by that, but I felt like in the zone. I was like, this is so what I need to be doing with my life. This is really great. I felt inspired. I felt like other people were inspired. And at that point, we started with that group of people. We started a team called Dear Aunt Gertrude. It was first just the idea of the first show. We were like, let's make it a type of family reunion. And Dear Aunt Gertrude was sort of birthed that night. And we started the show with a letter from her about how she couldn't make it to the show or to the reunion. And so that was like the catalyst to kind of hold the show together. And then everybody was like, that's the name of the team. Like, we have to be Dear Aunt Gertrude. And so we ended up making that the name. And that was the first group that was part of the Box Theater, which is what we became eventually. And yeah, that will always be a sweet spot for me because some of the people that were a part of that first team were like not seasoned actors or trained actors, but they were people that we felt like had the right energy for what we were trying to do. And we were just like, come along, come be part of this. Like, we don't know what we're doing, but we love improv and we'll teach you what we know. And we feel like you have the right spirit for it. And so they did. Those people like are in the picture. Like, they joined us that time and we were taking a risk on them and surely they were taking one on us, but like somehow it was the right thing for the right time.
Yeah.
I don't even think anyone would ever do that again, maybe unless you're in a really small town and you're like, we need the baker and the shoemaker. But like, yeah, this was just a sweet beginning and we had such random people a part of that team, but it was like, yeah, we're going to do this and have some fun doing it. And so for a short time, that's what the team was made of. And then eventually it sort of evolved into like the people that were like very serious about it. So, yeah.
Kayla did want me to thank you for taking the risk with her and letting her play with you and become a part of Dear Aunt Gertrude.
Oh, that's so sweet. I love Kayla. Like, I feel like she was such a gem for us and she would bring insights and wisdom all the time to us. And it really did help the whole team overall. So that was a gift. She was a gift.
She did say, I think she vetted me a little bit just to make sure I wasn't crazy, and then she just laughed and left the room. So I don't know exactly what she meant by that, but, you know.
Aww.
So one of the things, and this is just one of the areas that I give you so many props for, is that culture that you cultivated there with Dear Aunt Gertrude, even before you had your own space, the shows that you were producing, and there's a question here, I promise. But you put together such interesting packages for the shows. So you did a lot of short form shows, but it wasn't just, hey, we're Dear Aunt Gertrude, let's do Moving Bodies. It was, I know you did a camp for one season or for, I don't know how many shows, but it was a camp theme. And Kayla talks about there were a couple lawyers in your group, and you did produced a show that was like a courtroom show. That was the kind of what everything was hanging on. It was a short form show, but between scenes it was like court. And I love that because I'm a short form fan in general, but when you package it in such a way that makes it even more engaging, it's a gift.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think that was maybe the little entrepreneur in me, or just like the marketing spirit that I didn't know I had, but just feeling like, if it was a Friday night or a Saturday night, what would I want to go to? And I think as a team, eventually it became a team conversation, but it was like, what could be our theme? And we sort of broke it into quarters. So we would just look at like, what could be the theme for this next show? Or if we were a theater, it would be a season. This is what the season looks like. But I mean, we were a theater. I don't mean to say it like that, but like a traditional theater. So I think that's what the inspiration was. The idea of, how do we get people fired up about improv and to be like, we want an experience. We want to be a part of an experience. So that was how we were thinking of it. As far as the lawyer show, that was brought up by 3 particular improvisers, and they may have tested it on that stage, I think, first, but they did eventually take it to some other places too. So that was like the first kind of branching out. But they did do that show actually. And we did different ones. We did summer school, and we spelled it wrong. We did like camp. At that point, I think we started to realize maybe there's some shows we can build. I think we started to think outside. So we had a second show at some point. We did it like based on Shel Silverstein's poetry, or we just played with different ideas. We don't know what will work, but what would be most fun for us, or what could be a whole new challenge for us. And that's sort of where those themes started to evolve. I think we had a winter show called Figgy Pudding, which nobody even references anymore. So it was like a really bad suggestion for a title, but it was the title, and it was just like around the winter theme. And eventually we built a show called The Love Show, and that was one of my favorite long forms. I felt like it was sort of based off of the documentary style, where we had couples talking about a made up reality of what it was like to be a couple, or how they first met and all of that. And so it was almost written in 3 acts. And so the opening act was them, discussing their relationship or the beginning of the relationship, and then going into a blackout. And then we start with scenes inspired off of those stories. And we did that, in 3 different rounds, but also the evolution of a relationship, the beginning, middle, and end kind of. And that was just such a lovely, fun, I mean, it was very simple, when you think of it, but it was such a fun show. And that show stuck around for a while. So every time February rolled around, we tried to find a place or a space to do it. And it was really lovely.
That would be a long form show then, yeah?
That was a long form show. Yeah, we eventually moved into long form. I think because we were just learning more and more about it. And we didn't really know. We didn't know what we were doing. You maybe took one class or workshop, or like barely one of us took like maybe a full class, but the rest of us didn't. So it was like, we don't know this totally, but we're going to try to teach it as much as we know it. And I think looking back, it really doesn't matter. It really matters about the creative process. And again, I think if people are showing up and saying to each other, we're going to try something, and commit to really trying to learn the craft as best you can. I don't think there was any disrespect for the format or for, what people were doing and how they were doing it well. But then just sort of getting in there and just being like, hey, let's just try it. And I think that is probably what led to a lot of our success, because we were having so much fun with each other.
Yeah. That's a huge thing. And I also love SAC. I still consider it my home theater, even though I don't live down there anymore, and nothing but love for the place. But the SAC show, The Duel of Fools, is produced very well. It's a very fun show, and I like it a lot. I performed it a heck of a lot. But I think SAC is missing a little something without the option or without the place for people to create something new and birth it there. And there are lots of reasons why there's not room for that right now at SAC. So no judgment, but I think that having that crucible like you did down there and recognizing that packaging this and orienting it in a way that's marketable, but also leads to a lot of fun, because in the duel you're on stage the whole time, so you're playing a character the whole time you're there. It's not just you, but then you kind of took that to the next level and say, well, if that's true, then why not play a camper? Why not play a kid in summer school the entire time we're there? And it's just this extra layer that's just so much fun.
Yeah, I think that because of my traditional theater upbringing, just the character stuff has always been what I gravitated towards. So even when it's a long form, I think like if it's more character based, you're going to have my heart, you know? I think the more it is, the more I can like be a part of it. I don't know. I think that really is due to the training that I've had, because I think that's where it's like you're not stuck to the limitations of a script, but you can start to really play with it, changing your voice, changing your body, changing your mindset. And even just something as small as a facial expression, it can inspire such a different character. And so I think, if you can keep extending that and extending it into like different parts, even to the marketing of the show, I think that's a win.
Yeah.
So.
I need to ask about Shell and Gainesville Improv Festival.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you for bringing this back to my memory. Oh gosh. Yes. Okay. So we had developed a show called Shell based on Shel Silverstein's poetry. And it was a simple concept that we had created. You read a poem randomly. You ask the audience so we flip through the book and you ask the audience to tell us when to stop. And wherever they say stop is the page you stop. And that's the poem you read. And then the next scenes are inspired by that poem. Well, we get to the Gainesville Improv Festival. We're so pumped to be there, of course. And, you know, as soon as we get there, just like anyone else, we want to see the stage. We want to walk around. We want to feel a little more comfortable in it. And we're in the audience right before our show is about to go up. So, you know, you wait till like the last 5 minutes and then you go get backstage and whatnot. And so we're in the audience, and the people right in front of us they say, hi, we're going to do a show tonight for you that's inspired by poetry. So I think they may have even had a book of poetry. And I was like, oh no, we're next. And we're doing the exact same thing. And I remember all of us just like panicking and our hearts just sunk. And we were like, but this is what we came to do. We cannot change it at this point. And maybe the smartest thing would have been to change it. I just don't think we had it in us to abort mission and try something else. But it was like we thought we had come with such an original idea, and sure enough the people right before us had the same idea. So that was how Gainesville Improv Festival went.
The way Kayla tells it, she always calls it the Mighty Wind moment. I don't know, have you seen Mighty Wind?
Oh yeah, it's been a minute, but yes.
Well, it's when the trio is down in the green room and they hear the band before them playing their song that they were going to play.
Oh yes.
And they're like, what? So that's how she refers to it. And what she also says that the hosts were very apologetic because it was one of the house teams there in Gainesville that was doing it, right? That did it. One of the Theater Strike Force teams.
You may be remembering that better than me. Yeah, I don't know for sure. I don't remember that portion, but yeah.
Kayla said they were like, we're so sorry. We did not know they were going to do that. And I think if I'm remembering what Kayla told me correctly, because I don't think I was there, I think Kayla said that they also were like, hey, we're just going to do this spur of the moment. Like it wasn't something they prepared.
Yeah.
They just were like, we're going to just do this thing. And my thought was, did they just read it? Like read your description in the flyer or whatever, or online and be like, hey, well, let's do that. Like it was maybe planted in their subconscious.
Yeah, it might have been. It might have been because, it was just like so very weird. And I remember, like, I think probably we were just like balloons. We were just so deflated in that moment. It was like we were so pumped up and excited. And then all of a sudden, like, oh no, like even slow motion, probably looking at each other. It was terrible. So, that's a great description though. A mighty wind description.
Well, I think it's great that you just stuck with it as well. The other thing Kayla said was because she was also, I think Doctor Whose Line Is It Anyway came on after, so she didn't have time to go into the green room with you after the show because she had to run back on stage for that because it was in the same block. So she didn't get to go back. But how did everyone feel the show went? Was there any conversation back there that you remember in terms of the, I don't know if fiasco is the right word, but...
Yeah, I don't remember the conversation, except what does strike me now as a feeling was maybe it was just like not our best show, you know? So it was like, I think it was the feeling of like we did a 7 out of 10 or something. Because I think we had just lost our momentum at that point. And
yeah,
maybe a more refined team would say to themselves, like, it doesn't matter, we're amazing, like, let's get out there and kick butt or whatever. We love doing improv, like, let's make it a great show, even though that happened. It was just hard for us to let go of. And maybe me as a leader, I'll just admit that. It's very hard for me to separate some of those things in the moment. And I don't want that to ever carry to my team, but I know the reality, it very much could. And it could have that night. So I think that's the only thing I can remember from that, because that was years ago.
yeah.
But it would have been that feeling of like, well, we came and we did it and we made it through, and it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't obviously our best stuff.
Yeah.
So I think the audience already had been exposed to that. They're like, it's like watching a rerun in a way, you know?
Yeah, I think Kayla said that whoever started the Doctor Whose Line Is It Anyway show said, hey, we're Doctor Whose Line Anyway. We are not going to read any poetry.
Yes, yes. I was like, oh no, even sadder.
But that's as an improviser, I love being surprised on stage. I don't think that's a surprise that I would have been enjoying if that happened to me.
I think there probably are teams that could pivot very quickly in that moment. We just weren't prepared for that. And maybe like future years we would have been. But I have seen teams where, similarly to the one that went on before us, they'll come out and like, we just came up with this idea backstage that we're going to, I think Available Cup Holders did it once. And they're like, we're going to set a timer. And whenever our timer goes off, we have to speak in Shakespearean language. And I remember being like, you just came up with that? Like that's such an amazing concept. So they did a whole long form set. They would change their language whenever their timer went off. And so I do think there are teams that can pivot like that. And that agility is something to covet. But yeah, it just wasn't who we were at the time. So.
Yeah. I also think there's a difference between coming up with something in the green room and coming up with something 5 minutes before your show because you were robbed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
It's,
that's for sure.
I'm going to bring some extra cash and hide it in this belt on my vacation versus I just got mugged. What do I do?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. That's a good analogy. Thanks, Stephen. You're making me feel better.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was, and I think coming down to those decisions, if I'm just trying to think of like what I would have done, and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer in terms of doing what you were going to do or not, but I know what would be going through my head would be, this is an uncomfortable moment for everybody because we were all just kind of blindsided. We can either do the thing we're familiar with or introduce even more unknown or more stress into the situation by trying to change it.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's just not a great position to be in any way around. So I, like I said, I don't know if I said, but kudos, I think for being able to even get up and do a show after that. The fact that it was a 7 out of 10, I think is a win.
Thank you.
Dear Aunt Gertrude eventually became a part of the Box Theater, but you started the Box Theater.
Yes, in 2009 is when we launched. We had Dear Aunt Gertrude as the first team. It probably took about 2 years before we had a second team. And we started classes probably 6 months into it, or maybe not, maybe 4 months into it. We started teaching classes, building that community, and really, really putting a huge emphasis on the idea of community. So that was kind of the start of it. Eventually it evolved to about, 14 teams. That's kind of where we ended. That's 3 locations later. The beginning was lovely. It was just like this really intimate space with 50 seats. And again, it was really the gift of that space to us to just bring people in and sort of get to know them through improv. At that point, we had hosted like a jam within 3 years, I think. We had a big show that was like a bunch of other improv teams in the area. We got to know them a little bit. We were realizing that the Tampa community was bigger than we thought, and even Tampa Bay, I would say. it was very exciting at that time because we weren't the only thing. And it was just neat to see other people were interested in it and loving it as much as we did. And some of the St. Pete community was kind of growing also at that time. And then, yeah, I think every year we had like a different theme, and we were trying different stuff with classes as well. I think we ran a class that was like parent and child, like they could both come and do improv
fun
together. Yeah, and it was fun. It was really fun to do that. I think we maybe partnered even with one of the local Groupon or something, and I think that got a bunch of publicity for us. So like a lot of people started to hear about us at that point, which was really a gift also. I think that it was just like, when I look at those early years, it was such a sweet time. It was not overwhelming. It was a sweet time that we were in each other's lives. We would go have pizza afterwards, we were close. And it's really neat to see how improvisers' lives have evolved, because it's neat to see. It's cool to see how some of these people are still thriving in their creativity.
Yeah.
And so whether that's writing or producing, or maybe they're not doing improv per se, but they're just like thriving in creativity.
Yeah.
And that to me is like really the heart of it, really, because improvisers are artists, and we're like the raw, forgotten, obscure artists, I would say, because we're kind of doing it in these dark spaces, or these spaces that nobody really sees in some ways.
Yeah.
And also because it might be somebody that just has interest in it, but maybe they're not fully diving into their artistry, and eventually they get there. Maybe in that way, improv is really truly for everybody, because I think it doesn't matter if you're a painter or a writer, a poet, a songwriter. I think the things that are unlocked when you do improvisation are the things that need to be unlocked as an artist. And I really feel that in my core. And that's not just because I've taught it. I think I always said to people, I never felt like I had to sell a class, because I believe it with everything in me. And so I think those early years at the box were just like, there was space and time, and really just the unhurriedness of enjoying the craft. And man, I miss those days.
Yeah.
But it was a sweet time for sure.
And we don't need to dwell on this because you can talk about it if you want. I will say the website is still live for the box.
Yeah.
But it fell victim to COVID, right?
Yes, it did. So, well, there's a couple things that happened that may or may not have been part of the ending of the box. So the box is, the only reason that website is still live, and it probably needs to be taken down, is just because I'm still doing the corporate piece, but we've transitioned to Improv Exchange. So I still do corporate training with improvisation. And also I feel like there's a part of me that doesn't necessarily know how to keep a history of what existed, because I would love that to be somewhat of a legacy for the Tampa Bay improv community, that we existed and we, maybe laid the foundation for something that could be futuristic, or maybe it's evolving now. I don't know how that should work. And so maybe if anyone's listening that has advice for that, I would love to be able to tell that history a little bit.
And I would say that idea is definitely true. And because I've had conversations with people after coming home, so I know this firsthand, but the lives that you influenced in all the creative ways that you're explaining, whether the people are doing improv or not, you will never know how many lives you touched through that theater from the beginning until you had to shutter. And it's many, many more than you could possibly guess. And in all of those ways, when we tend to look at these things that were in our lives and no longer are, in all those ways, what you did was a tremendous success.
Thank you, Stephen. That definitely is good to hear, and definitely is healing to my heart in some ways, because I think for me, improv has been a love story in some ways, and just like a journey. Like, I fell in love with it right away. It was like love at first sight. And then sure enough, when we closed the theater, it was like a breakup, it was such a breakup for me. And I think had a worldwide pandemic not happened, I would still be doing it, So I think towards those latter years, it was a little harder for me. And I'll talk just a little bit about leadership. So when you lead a group of creative people, maybe everyone that leads anybody feels this way, but sometimes people just want a pound of flesh at the end. It's just like, it's really tricky, because it's like you're an improv, you think, well, I'm leading these people, but I also am friends with these people, and they're my peers, and I perform alongside them, and I'm a part of their team, and I also lead them. And I think that's just like it's a hard place to be. And so I think towards the latter years, there were some things happening that felt like it made everything harder. Like I got into improv because I love the creativity of it and I love doing it. But then to lead a business with it is so different. It's a different mindset, you know? And I had to learn that sort of the hard way because you have to deal with human resources and budgets and marketing and all the things that you're like, oh, I didn't mean to sign up for this. You know, I just want to do the creative part. But when you do it, and I felt committed to those artists. And I felt like, yeah, this is the hard work that has to go in order for us to be able to do the things we love. But some of that other stuff on the other side of work can wear you down, and it can wear down your soul a little bit, especially when it comes to the human resources part, because artists sometimes are temperamental and they have opinions about a lot of things. And it can feel like in some ways, like it's not working. And really the evidence that people keep showing up, it is working, but it can just weary you in a lot of ways, or it can make you weary. So I think towards the end, I was feeling that in a way that I just didn't know how to articulate, and I didn't know how to even manage in some ways. Like when I look back, I think, gosh, my life now has that saying everybody says, like the work-life balance is like a little better, but I'm missing obviously the huge creative component that I had. And I think that it wasn't sustainable at that point. And so when the pandemic happened, I in no way wanted to walk away from it, but I was like, I don't think we can keep a theater open without running classes or shows or having any income at all. And so I think that was where it was pretty evident what needed to happen. And I think in retrospect, it was the right thing that needed to happen. But it was definitely hard. And talk about like evolution. I think it was like, I think we always knew that this wouldn't be around forever, but we also did it just like anyone's end of life. You just don't, you're like, oh shoot, I wasn't prepared for this. I think we felt that way. And then it was just, somewhat heartbreaking. And also like a breaking of the community, that was probably the biggest piece, because it was like all these people that were friends and in each other's lives now for at least 6 months during and after the pandemic were just not even connected anymore. Yeah. It was like cutting the line. So I do think in that way it felt like a relationship, because it had such ties in every part of my life. And then all of a sudden it was just overnight sort of gone. And if you're asking for honesty, like maybe as a leader, I was somewhat disillusioned as to who maybe had my back in some ways, because I think I always want improv to be a value system that is lived off the stage as much as on the stage.
Yeah.
And maybe we're all trying to work towards that. We're just like not perfect, right? But I think at that point, I was just like, I just assumed everyone would show up to help me close the theater. And that didn't happen. A handful of people did. And if those people ever call on me, Stephen, I will be there. I will be there with tools. I will have my U-Haul truck, whatever I need to have their back, because that meant so much to me that they were there for me in the hardest moment of this whole exchange. And so that is kind of how the box ended. And that was 11 years, by the way. We stayed around for 11 years. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say as well, I've been, I think, on the other side of that sort of dynamic a little bit, and being older and wiser now, I do feel bad. It's difficult, and this is not, I'm not talking about you here, but it's difficult when you have someone who is a high creative in the power position, and then you also have, high creatives that are in the, I don't know what the other position is, but not in the position of power. And then because neither know how to communicate quite with each other. And, in our situation, it was, I feel like a lot of it could have been resolved had both sides communicated better, but neither side knew how to do that. And I have so much more empathy now than I did then for that position, because there are so many more concerns than I was aware of at that time.
Yeah.
That the people leading theaters have to consider and think about. And no great crimes were committed or anything like that, but we had real strong feelings down in the ranks. And at the end of the day, they really were all just feelings, and feelings that weren't based on all the information. And we were probably too hard on the people in power.
Yeah, I think that's great. I resonate with that. I think that I definitely have compassion for all of my leaders in my life now.
Yeah.
Because I know it's not easy. And even one of my bosses now, like I feel like sometimes I go to criticize something, but then I realize I really don't know all the information. And this person stays up till midnight working with the clients and stuff. So it's just like, I don't know all the stories. I don't know what's happening behind the scenes. And I think that there is that piece of humility that maybe was lacking before. But I do feel like our teams, so I would meet with team leaders and they would, obviously be empowered to go lead their team however they felt they should. But like the culture and the DNA of what we did at the box, I felt like the heart of it was really to try to live those values and also implement those values within our teams. And so I do feel like that was always at the forefront. That was always something we were trying to say and sort of tell that story to each other and the new people that entered in. But I think that sometimes it just gets lost in our humanity and who we are and our flawed perspectives.
Yeah.
But I will say, even being honest with all of that, I do think there are sweet moments throughout those 11 years. And I think there are treasured memories and all of those good things. So I don't want to diminish that in any way.
No, not at all.
I feel like I'm sure you can say this too. Like there's times where you as a performer are doing something on stage and it's like, holy crap, that was so magical. Like, how did that happen? And it, even as you were in it and involved in it, you're like, how did that even work? And then there's other times where you're on stage and you feel like that was like work. You know what I mean? And so when I look over the 11 years, I'm like, there was a lot of those magical moments. And obviously there were some work moments too, but I'm so grateful that we like created magic.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's an amazing thing. And I give you, again, one of the reasons I respect you so much is that you saw a need and a void, you recognized it, and you didn't just mediocrely put something out there and say good enough, but you strive for excellence and you ended up creating a theater and it took a pandemic to kill it. So it is an amazing thing that you were able to do and accomplish, and a credit to your vision and your love of improv.
Thank you, Stephen. That is so sweet. Nobody's ever said it that way, that it took a pandemic to kill it. Wow, that's really sweet. Thank you.
So since then, now you said you're still doing the corporate aspect of it, which I'm very thankful for, which is now Improv Exchange, you said?
Yes, Improv Exchange. Mm-hmm.
Where you're doing corporate workshops and that kind of thing for businesses. Is that?
Yes, some, and like some educational. So I have done some partnerships with USF here in Tampa, particularly with their honors college. But yes, I will partner with corporations and then bring in a training depending on what their needs are. Sometimes it's a more general training and sometimes it's very customized depending on, again, what they are looking for. I also do teach at a private school. So I'm still teaching and I teach improvisation there to students that are mostly, it's a very specialized community. They have some students are just typical students. And then there's a specialty group of students with ADHD, high anxiety, and dyslexia. And so I remember being first hired there and thinking, you want me to put highly anxious kids on stage? But in all the years that I've actually worked with this school, I do feel like, oh my gosh, it really is just exposure therapy. You have to just get them on stage and they will grow. And they have. I mean, we just did a show in December and it was like these kids who came in August were like, I'm not going up there, just shined through their whole performance. So it was really cool to see that. And I think I'm always reconvinced because I'm kind of like at the beginning, like, oh, maybe you're right. Maybe you shouldn't be up there. And then by the end, I'm like, oh yeah, dude, you got this. You guys were amazing. So I think that's good. I teach that class also through the perspective of we're always improvising and that you can use these skills in anything you do, even if you never perform again. So that's really where I come at it for them, because I want them to see those connections, whether it's a high school interview or, a date or something that they're going to do in the future, being at a wedding with people they don't know or whatnot, that they can improvise their way through it. And so I would even say that class is more like improv for life kind of class.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I feel like that's something when I was going through the SAC classes that they were pretty clear about, or they stated it that this is, you can use these skills anywhere. This isn't, you're not taking these classes to get on stage per se. And I know some of that was to tamp down some expectations.
Yeah.
But I also felt like they believed it, and I believe it too, that there are skills that you learn that you can apply knowingly or subconsciously in other instances that you just get kind of better at life.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I feel like, maybe you feel this way too, but I still feel like I'm a student in so many ways, and I'll learn something new about improv, or I'll think, oh, I know those two things about improv. What if we combine them? What would it look like? I do think that that's still that mindset of you're experimenting, and nobody's saying you can't do that in improv. You can try it and see if it works, you know?
Yeah.
So in that way, I'm still a student of it and still learning very much. So.
And if anyone's listening and debating whether or not they should start a team with just one level of experience, do it.
Yes, do it. And invite us.
Yeah.
To see your show.
That's it for part 1 of my interview with Crystal Haralambou. Next time, we'll talk a little bit about teaching and enjoying improv, and Crystal will answer my Proustian questionnaire. If there is someone you know you think I should interview, or if you'd like to be interviewed yourself, drop me a line at improvbrain@gmail.com. For more information about me or Crystal, check out the show notes. Join me on Patreon for occasional bonus content. If you're enjoying the show, leave us a review wherever you're listening and spread the word. And if you don't do any of those things, just keep tuning in. Thanks for listening to Improv Autopsy.